Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Cynthia Germanotta, and I'm president and co-founder of Born This Way Foundation, which I co-founded with my daughter, Stephanie, who many of you may know as Lady Gaga. Our team at Born This Way could not be more excited as we announce this incredible campaign, Be Kind, Be There. Many of us are really experiencing complete disruption in our lives for the first time. We're facing circumstances that many of us have never seen. Many of us may never see them again. We're experiencing emotions that are all over the map, fear, grief, lack of control. Some people doing okay, and we see others that are really just severely struggling. And that number seems to be increasing, particularly among youth. And both Born This Way Foundation and Jack.org are youth-led, youth-inspired organizations. We're both excited, but also determined to equip you with the knowledge and the skills that it's really going to take to be kind to each other and to be there for each other. I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to have the privilege of welcoming the panelists for today's conversation from Jack.org, Jessie, Shayan, Jess, and our very own executive director, Maya Anista Smith from Born This Way Foundation. So welcome everyone, and Maya, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you for your incredible leadership and your inspiration in this moment and always. And thank you to the Jack.org team for the amazing work that you do. We're honored to have the opportunity to partner with you. We know from all of the work that Born This Way Foundation does that a majority of young people are interested in learning coping skills and tools to deal with the stress of everyday life. And I'm so excited to chat with our partners at Jack.org to learn more about how we can lean into those tough conversations, provide the tools they're desperately looking for, and continue to build community around young people. So Jessie, hi, it's so nice to be connected in person.
Thanks so much, Maya and Cynthia. Can't even find the word to describe how excited I am to be here and how honored we are to work on this partnership with Born This Way. I think it is hugely exciting for youth mental health and for Jack.org in general. It's a really tough time right now, and I don't think there's any denying that. And even before COVID happened or the pandemic started, the stats are scary for youth mental health. In Canada, 25% of all deaths are deaths by suicide. That's a number that's completely unacceptable, and that's in normal times. And what's troubling about this pandemic is that we're stuck inside, and we're removed from our resources, we're removed from our usual coping mechanisms, and we're removed from our friends and family in some cases. And that means that people are going to struggle more. People that haven't struggled before might experience mental health struggle for the first time, and those that have struggled before may see that it's exacerbated. And so knowing that, we know we need to lean into being there for each other and supporting one another. The hard part, though, is that it's sometimes easier said than done. And it's not necessarily common sense on how to approach someone. And people are afraid of suggesting that someone might be struggling, so they don't want to reach out to them. Or when they do, they don't know how to respond when they share with them. And that's really why we built Be There in the first place, was young people coming to us and saying, amongst all this incredible conversation that's happening for mental health, we actually don't get the help that we need when we need it. And our friends and our family, why stigma exists is because we're not educated, don't know how to be there for us. So we built Be There, and it was quite a project, and it's been launched for about a year, and we've had over 250,000 unique visitors. So it's obviously filling a gap that people were looking for and giving them the education they wanted. And then you insert the pandemic, and it's more important than ever that we really are there and we support each other. And that's why this partnership excites me. We may not be able to be trained in person, but we can have resources online and we can work together.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm excited for this conversation. I'll just share a little bit from our perspective, and then Jessie will turn the conversation over to the people who build Be There every day. Our research at Born This Way Foundation shows that young people in the United States who describe their environments as kind are more likely to be mentally healthy. So we know that that aspirational characteristic, that kindness gene that's just inherent within young people really makes a difference. Those statistics ring true for young people that are in high school, in colleges, in workplaces. And our work at Born This Way Foundation, and really the core of this partnership, lies at the intersection between kindness and mental health, because we recognize the value that it has on our individual and collective wellness. So it's our belief that kindness will get us through this moment and all of the moments. And we're so proud of the work that you've done with Be There. So can you tell us a little bit about how you think about kindness in terms of being there for somebody?
I think kindness is there. I think the world wants to be kind, and there's so many people that really want to support people in their lives. And that part of it is really amazing. We did a survey before we launched Be There, and it showed that with over 1,200 young people, and it showed that 89% of young people had been there for someone and tried to support their mental health, and only 39% of them felt prepared to do so. That was the need we were trying to fill. It was like, the kindness is there, people want it, they need help activating and being able to do it. And that's why we built Be There. And I truly believe, like Born This Way, that one of the kindest things you can do is take time out of your day, not even for a specific person, but for your community, and educate yourself on how to support someone. So that when you throw out on Facebook or on Instagram, they're like, hey, if you're struggling, I'm here for you. You actually know how to do that in a really safe way.
As you mentioned in the beginning, our work at Born This Way Foundation and your work at jack.org is guided by young people. And Jesse, you and I, as former young people, slightly former young people, should really give all of the platforms and microphones that we have access to the young people. So it is my honor to be joined by two incredible youth mental health advocates from jack.org. Shayan and Jess, I'm so excited to have you here, and I can't wait for you to introduce yourselves and share with us what you've learned on how to be there for the loved ones in your life, and how you think about building a kinder and braver world.
Oh, yes. My name is Shayan. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I work with jack.org, specifically on Be There. I'm one of our about 40 staff members who work at jack.org, but myself, as well as Michelle specifically, are on the Be There team. So we work day in and day out on the kind of day-to-day things surrounding Be There. And by far, this has been one of the most exciting things that's happened to Be There in a very long time, but also just my life in general, being in quarantine. It's a lot cooler when things like this can take place. And yeah, before being involved as a staff member at jack.org, I was actually in our network. So I started at jack.org about 5 years ago now as a talk speaker, where just wanted to talk about mental health, didn't really know how to, and that program specifically trains young people to deliver mental health presentations to high schools, universities. And so I did that for about 2 years, and then I became a network representative with jack.org alongside Jess. Since then, I've stayed involved in a few different capacities, which has finally led me to being here as a staff member working on Be There. And I am beyond excited. Just every meeting I've had today, I've had to defer and say, I'm really sorry, I'm really giddy right now, because this is a really exciting day for me, even because of this. So super excited to be here and to share with not all of you, but Jess as well, because this is our first time speaking together actually on a stage, which is super exciting, even though we've been friends for 5 years. So really excited to share the stage with you, Jess.
I'm really excited about this. So my name is Jess. I live in Windsor, Ontario, which is actually right across the border from Detroit, Michigan. And I live here with my partner and our 3 dogs. I've been involved with jack.org just a little bit longer than Cheyenne, for about 6 years. I got involved originally through a summit, actually, which is jack.org's yearly conference. And I went to that summit and left thinking, holy moly, all the things that I wish I would have learned when I was growing up and when I was in high school. And I took that home to Windsor, and I never let go of jack.org, and I'm so grateful. I've been involved in all of our programs. I was a talk speaker just like Cheyenne. I ran a chapter of jack.org at my university campus while I was doing my undergrad, which was really incredible. I was a network rep with Cheyenne for 2 years, which also was beyond incredible. And now I play a really cool role at jack.org. I'm actually a board liaison. So I sit on the board and liaison between our youth and our board of directors, which is a really exciting pilot project that we're working on. And in my personal life, I also work in nonprofit. I work at the local United Way here in Windsor.
Thank you for your amazing work, Jess, with Jack.org and with the United Way. So my first question, and I'll ask Jess this to you first, and I'll first just share a little bit of my soapbox. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we've made in this moment is this language around social distancing, right? Because what we actually mean, right, is physical distancing. But because of both the reality of the moment and the language around the moment, we know that young people are facing challenges to their mental health because of the effects of this period of social isolation and how we're talking about it. How can, Jess, tell me a little bit about how you suggest people can still be there for their friends during this time of physical distancing?
Yeah, I agree completely, Maya. Just because we're physically separated doesn't mean that we're socially separated at all. And it's more important now than ever for us to stay connected and to be there for the people that we love. So yeah, a challenging time, but a really important time for us to support our friends and to show them that we care. What's really, really great about the Be There Golden Rules, as we call them, is that they can really be practiced across different situations, across different groups of people, in different places of the world. We can really use it as a framework. And I'm gonna, ask Shayan to jump in here and help me add color to the Golden Rules and how they really apply during this time of physical distancing, where we're, not together, but we are still together. And so we'll go through the 5 rules, and keep in mind that they can be used interchangeably, and we use them whenever they make sense. So the first one is say what you see. And generally this might be pointing out physical changes we see. So my best friend who loves soccer stops coming to our soccer practices, and I'm like, hey, what's up? I've noticed that you're not coming to soccer practice, and that's something that you really love, and I'm worried about you. Is everything okay? But that looks different right now.
Yeah, so what that kind of looks like now is, maybe instead of kind of noticing the very obvious routine-based things, a lot of things that we're going to be noticing are much more nuanced in our relationships with people. So for example, if Jess and I chat every day, maybe it's the language that Jess is using that, it's just a bit different than how she normally speaks. Another thing too is just being proactive about that. So maybe it's not looking for a sign, but just noticing that, oh, I haven't really heard from this person in a long time, and just checking in more so right now, just because we don't have the benefit of seeing those physical cues or seeing those physical changes of when someone is, maybe something's going on.
And then the second golden rule is showing you care. And this is really just as easy as telling someone, whether you're talking to them on the phone or, on FaceTime, or you're texting, telling them that you care about them and that you're there for them if they need to talk to you or if they'd like to talk.
Yeah, and showing that you care in this case kind of works the same way, in the sense that our words that we want to use are still the same, but obviously when we're able to be there with someone, we can show it with our physical language. So giving them a hug and things like that. So right now, I think a big part of showing that you care is actually carving out time just for that. So for example, I have another call tonight where I'm just going to play some games online with my friends, and we're just going to be playing some online games together and chatting. But what we do, which is very different now than before, is actually carving out separate time to talk to each other and make sure that we can make sure we're getting those conversations of how's your day been, how are you actually feeling, so it's not overlapping with something else that hopefully makes that person feel a lot more heard and a lot more cared for.
And then the next rule is hear them out. So this is really about listening, and I mean really listening, right? So if you're in person, it's putting your phone down, it's showing body language, looking them in the eye, asking reflective questions that show them that you're listening. And then there's a big piece in here about not offering your own stories or advice. And this took me a long time to really craft, because I think it's really easy to jump in and say, I've experienced something like that and I know how you feel, but sometimes that's actually not what's best in that moment.
Yeah, and in this case, I think the biggest thing to recognize is, we still hear them out the same way we would as if we were in person, but one thing that's really important about hearing them out is really remembering that someone else's experience of this kind of physical isolation time is going to be vastly different than yours. And so if they're starting to talk and you feel like, oh, well, we're going through the same thing, we're all physically distancing, I just want to tell them like what's been working for me. It's better to make sure we're giving that person that space, because just, because you're both in a similar situation doesn't mean it's impacting you the same way. And at the end of the day, we don't know exactly what that person's situation is. So really just making sure we emphasize the hear them out rule during this time.
So it's just really important to remember that, you know, you're not a professional. I'm certainly not a professional. And we can do a lot by listening and showing we care, but we really can't do it all. And so remembering to set boundaries and to keep in mind your own mental health and steering your friend to professional help if they need it.
Especially in this case, with kind of what's happening, a lot of people have lost their main sources of support, you know, whether that's they had a counselor that they were able to see on campus, but now that schools are closed, they no longer have that. Or just they had a lot more friends that they could talk to on campus, but now they've moved back to their hometown and they don't have that aspect anymore. So there is a lot more chance that someone might, you know, latch on a bit more, so to speak, to you as a support, just throughout what's kind of happening. So it's very important that we are making sure we're outlining, this is kind of my role as your friend. This isn't the stuff that I can go in. I can't be the replacement as your counselor. But then also on Jess's note, giving them that alternative, which I know is what Jess is going to talk about next, of who you can actually talk to instead of, you know, your counselor or whatever it might be.
Yeah, great segue. The last one is to connect to help, and that part is really important. When someone needs some extra help, it's, you know, important that you suggest that they reach out to that help, whether it's a professional resource or it's a community support or it's a trusted adult, whatever that support, whatever makes sense for them. And I think you can do a lot for your friends and showing them that there's no shame in asking for that help by, you know, helping them look for which support maybe makes most sense for them, or talking to them after that first conversation, or in person going with them and waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah, and in this case, I think the biggest thing that we can do when it comes to connecting people to help is really making it easier for them of trying to find those resources proactively. So being aware of what things exist still virtually that people can access. But another thing on top of that is really encouraging people to do the self-care right now that they might have already been doing before, but maybe have kind of dropped the priority of right now. And I know we throw the term self-care around a lot, but especially in times like this, it's so important that when you have a day of just meetings, you know, you're at home, so you don't think that, oh, I haven't been stressed out because I've, you know, I haven't had the commute or other things like that. But it's so important just to have those moments to just de-stress and do something for the sake of doing it, not because it's just another thing in your schedule. So whatever that self-care might look like, really just encouraging that person to take that time to do that self-care.
If I can jump in for just a second, I think when you explain the golden rules out, we can explain them in 5 minutes and they seem really simple. And honestly, they are very simple, but they're not they're rules, but they're also skills. And skills take a long time to hone. And so we're asking people to spend 5 minutes on BeThere.org or more, whatever they can do. And hopefully you'll come back many times throughout different conversations, because within the website, there's the questions from the community, because every one of these golden rules has so many, but what if, but what if, but what if. And what's amazing is when you learn the skills, you can answer those what if questions yourself, even if no one else has ever answered them for you before, because the golden rules make sense of it all. But it really takes starting the education process. You'll be in such a better place in 5 minutes because they are simple to understand. But that ongoing learning and trial and error is really where it is. And part of that is being fair to yourself and being forgiving for yourself. You're not perfect. You're going to say the wrong thing. And sometimes it's about turning around and saying, hey, I don't know if that came off wrong. You let me know. I'm questioning myself on it, and people are going to be honest, and you're not supposed to be perfect, and that's part of knowing your role. You're just there as a shoulder and as someone to share with. So I think it's just important that we understand that it is simple. It's also complicated, but all we need is to start the journey of educating ourselves, and we'll build skills like we do anything else in our lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important just to point out that we want to model the type of behavior that we're asking for. So I'll do a quick lightning round. I will start. My favorite form of self-care is taking a nap. Jesse?
My favorite form of self-care, non-COVID, is playing a rugby game, but COVID, my favorite form of self-care is taking the dog to the park and playing Frisbee.
Nice. Cheyenne?
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot of dog owners here. My thing is honestly just grabbing my dog and taking him into my room and just like having a nice little cuddle time together for a bit, and then like maybe playing a little bit of such is just the biggest thing for me to relax.
Nice. Jess?
I have to agree. I don't have 3 dogs for nothing. And yeah, they're definitely my self-care, whether it's a walk or it's Frisbee or it's a cuddle, which they don't always love, but I do. So
after this webinar, I got a pandemic puppy like many people, so I'll need your advice. I have a 3-month-old. Okay, so next question I want to ask you, and I had the incredible privilege of speaking to a group of high school students this week, and so many young people who are navigating transitions in this moment are feeling particularly stressed. And one of the questions I got most often was, how do we tell the difference between like regular mood changes and symptoms of a larger mental health issue? So first, however you're feeling, for the young people that are watching this, is valid. However you are surviving this moment is okay, whether sometimes that means just getting out of bed or not, or if that means you're going for a run and like writing the next great novel. So however you're dealing with it is okay. But for young people and their parents who are looking for warning signs, Shayan, I would love your thoughts on how do we navigate that difference?
Yeah, and thank you, Maya, for that kind of little note about it. That by all means, what I'm about to say right now is just kind of the best, not to say best guess, because it's not just a guess, but it's the, as people who aren't professionals, it's not by any means a diagnosis that this is what's a mental health struggle and this isn't. Everything that you're feeling is 100% valid, but as people who are looking out for people to recognize those warning signs in order to differentiate between, oh, this person is just having a bad day versus, there's something deeper going on there, the things that we want to look out for are 3 main rules. The first is that what they're feeling is intense, it's long lasting, and that it's having a big impact. So what that means is by intense, we all experience kind of everyday emotions, whether it's happiness, sadness, things like that. But when it's intense, it's something that's very overpowering. And, you might feel it and not be able to feel other things. So maybe, it's a really great day because the weather is great outside and your friends are over and all this great stuff's happening, but you still feel this negative feeling. And that can be a very intense, overpowering feeling. Long lasting is then a bit more self-explanatory, but essentially meaning that it's not something that's lasting, just a couple of minutes because you watched a sad movie and you're feeling really sad. That's not necessarily means that you have some kind of mental struggle. But if this is something that's lasting days, weeks, months, or even years now, where consistently that this thought has been in the back of your head, maybe it goes away sometimes when you are, hanging out with friends or whatever, but then later on it comes back and consistently you've had these same kind of emotions and feelings, that's another sign that maybe it's something a bit bigger. And lastly, that it's having a big impact. So in that case, it's taking away from other aspects of our life. So maybe you aren't hanging out with your family as much now because of what you've been feeling, or your friends, and you've been, intentionally skipping out on parties or whatever it is because you've been feeling these things. That can be another sign of a mental struggle. So it doesn't have to be just one of these things. It can be a combination of them. And I'll give an example quickly of one of our Be There stories, actually, Sadia and her mom, Luana, who they did a story for us where, Luana was telling us about when Sadia was in school, she was noticing a lot of different things about Sadia's behaviors kind of changing, and it was very small things that I feel like a mom would only be able to notice. But that's the great thing, is that it really depends on your relationship. But she was saying that it was the way that Sadia was putting her hair up in the morning and the way she would walk when she would go, how she would not hang out for family events or, skip out on dinner. And so it was kind of small things that on their own wouldn't seem like a big thing. But when you recognize the pattern and when you put it on a much bigger scale of this happened for a couple of years throughout high school, that's when Sadia's mom, Lana, knew that something was maybe going on. And so that's the best advice I would give, is to really look out for those 3 signs and just try to look out for any major changes in behavior, especially right now, given that, we are quarantining. We do have to be a bit more aware of the minor things, and a lot of it might be harder to notice because it's digital. But I think those are good ways to kind of recognize those changes.
Thank you. Those are really important tips. Jesse, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think one really important thing to jump in with is just that you don't have to know. And people are often scared to ask. And the worst thing you can do is not say anything at all if your gut is telling you something is wrong with someone. So you can look at intense, you can look at long lasting, you look at big impact, and you should. But at the end of the day, if you're saying what you see, which is the first golden rule, and not making any judgments in that. So you're not saying, hey, are you struggling with your mental health? Because in that, someone might feel judged, there's stigma around it, that sort of thing. But if all you're saying is, hey, I sent you a text the last few days and I haven't heard back from you, is everything okay? You're saying what you see, there is no judgment. And the worst thing that happens, let's say, maybe you insult someone, they're upset that you asked, but that person now knows that you care and that you're reaching out and that you are there if they need or when they're ready to talk. And I think that's just really important and something that people have a hard time with, and just understand what behavior is making you feel like that and let them know. and ask if they're okay. And the worst thing that happens is they tell you, no, they're perfectly fine, or they get a little upset, but they know that you're there. That's really important.
I'm so used to hearting texts that I'm just like hearting your face. This is so important, so important. And the last speech that I gave before shelter in place, I was with a group of young people in New York City. And one of the most profound things that they told me that they so desperately wanted to hear from their parents. Parents so often are like, I'll fix it, I'll handle it. Like, I know I went through this when I was young, right? And what we heard those young people telling us, and what I keep in mind often as a mom, is that young people want to know you don't have the answers, but you'll stand next to them as you figure it out together, right? We don't need to have it all figured out for someone or with someone. We just have to commit to figuring out, making sure they get through it. And so I think that is so, so important. Speaking of standing with someone to get through something, Lady Gaga always talks about how it's completely okay to not be okay. And that's something that I keep in mind a lot. I know we're all mental health advocates, but speaking for myself, like there's definitely moments right now that I am not okay, right? But my job is to support other people's mental health, right? As it turns out, I'm the worst first grade teacher in the world, but that's all right. We're getting through it. So for somebody who is struggling with their own mental health, are we still able to be there for someone? And do you have any tips for us? Shayan and Jess, would love to hear from both of you, and Jessie, and just on some quick tips on how to be there for someone if you yourself are struggling as well.
Yeah, I can kind of go quickly for the beginning part of it. And I think, Maya, what you said absolutely kind of ties into this, that there are ways to still validate what that person's feeling, because that's really the biggest thing, while also letting that person know that you might not be the best person to talk to about this at this time. Because again, depending on what's going on in our life, we're not always going to be in a position to help someone. There are different things that can kind of impact that. So I think there's a few different kinds of boundaries that we can learn to set for people. So one is specific topics that maybe are maybe touch points for you that you don't feel comfortable talking about. So maybe you just went through a really bad breakup and your other friend went through a bad breakup too, and they're coming to you for advice or to vent about it or whatever. And it's totally fair for you to still validate what that person's feeling and say, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way. I totally understand that you would be feeling that way, but honestly, right now, this is still a tough thing for me to talk about given what I just went through. So would it be okay if you chat with XYZ? And at that point, you can give them those resources. There's also boundaries of time as well. So, especially right now with this kind of physical isolation time, I feel like some people wake up at like 2 o'clock and it's normal for them. Some people wake up at like 6 a.m. and it's normal. So really, if that person's messaging you and let's say it's 3 a.m. or something, you can just say to them like, hey, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way, whatever is going on. I definitely want to talk to you about it, but I want to be able to do it at a time where I can give you my full attention. Is it okay if we chat tomorrow? Or actually, this week's really bad for me. Is there someone else you can talk to? And then maybe next week we can chat. So, letting them know in that way. Also on the kinds of support you can give. So kind of similar to what I said before, but just saying like, I feel like this issue, I want you to be able to get the best help you can. And I don't know if I'm the right person for that. So maybe you could talk to XYZ, and that's where you give them the other resources. So I know that's one way, but then also I think it's really important to be able to still be there for yourself as well during those times.
Totally. Jess, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, on the being there for yourself part, I have to say, I personally am super sensitive to other people, my partner, my friends. When something's not right in their life, I notice it right away. And then when something's not right in my life, it takes me a bit, and I'm like, oh wow, Jess, like, let's check in with ourselves here. And that's okay. That's a skill also. But there's kind of some things that I've learned in that. The first is really paying attention to the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, the things that are like, Jess, that's not really like you. When I'm not sleeping well at night, or, when I'm like sleeping in, those kinds of things are like weird for me. And so that may be when I'm like, okay, I should really check in with myself. The other thing is just really thinking about the things that charge you back up. And, we talk about self-care, and we did talk about self-care. I think self-care can be really wrapped up in those like pretty Instagram things and bubble baths. And some of those things are totally forms of self-care, but also keeping in mind the other things that charge us back up, right? So like I said, a good night's sleep, making sure we're eating really well, doing things we love, talking to the people we care about. All those things are forms of self-care that we should really pay attention to and know what those things are, so that when we need them, we know, where to go. And then the last piece of that for me is knowing who I can talk to, who I feel safe with. and sort of like when I can talk to them. So thinking about who that person is for you, who's your go-to, who do you feel safe with, who do you know, is gonna be there to listen and to validate, and keeping that top of mind so that when, you're feeling that things are off, you can go to that person right away.
Jessie.
So just in regards to general tips, just a few things that I've learned along the way that I think were really great for me. The first is, if you're trying to support someone, whether you're there in person or not, is to listen and be curious. I think be curious is really a great defining piece for me, to just ask questions and ask about things you don't understand. And if someone doesn't like the question you ask, leave space for them to say that. And set up those boundaries. But really, if you're just curious, you don't need much training. Just be there to listen and ask questions. The second is to not push too hard. So often we get this a lot from parents where they've asked their child so many times, are you struggling? Are you struggling? Are you struggling? And the kid says no. And what they're doing is they're just getting in their face, and you're pushing too hard. And when you push too hard when someone's really struggling, you often push them away. And so just letting someone you're there, asking if they're okay, and checking in every once in a while is important, and like pulling back. Obviously, if someone's really struggling and you think they're in crisis, that's a different story, and you need to push. And it's really about trusting your gut in that case. There's no 100% surefire way to know if someone is in crisis, but you need to trust your gut in that case. And if they are, get them the help that they need, which means to the hospital or to mental health support that's close by or to a professional. But yeah, really listen, be curious, and create space for them to understand that you're there, but you're not all over them, continually asking and pushing. And just as a wrap up, thank you so much to the Born This Way community, to the Jack.org community, for both of you tuning in, and just to anyone that takes the time to spend 5 minutes on BeThere.org to educate themselves, because I truly think it, in this time, is one of the most impactful things we can do.
Absolutely. It really, really matters. And I'm so glad that so many new people visited Jack.org today, and can't wait to increase those numbers. So in closing, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't thread the needle between our new edit to Be There and say, be kind and be there. And I'd love each of you just to share one way that we can create kinder spaces for young people, whether that's online or the eventual offline world that I promise we will live in again. But maybe Jessie, if you want to start us off, and we'll go Jessie, Shayan, and Jess to close us out. So a way to be kinder.
I think all the kind of tips I gave just before are a good start. But if I were to sum it all up, I would just say, before you respond, really think. And think about the golden rules. So even if you didn't learn the depth of the golden rules, if you just go back and think like, am I saying what I see here? Am I not being judgmental? How do I show that I care here? Hear them out. Like, am I hearing them out? Am I creating space for them to actually just speak? I really think just checking in with yourself, and before saying something, think about the impact that it's going to have on the person sitting across from you. And if you're not sure that it's going to have a good impact, just keep listening or ask a question. And I think that when we do that, we create a space where people feel like they're not judged and that we're on their team. And I think that's one of the most important things we can make someone feel that are struggling, is that someone is there and on their team, and when they need them, you're there for them.
Awesome. Thank you. Shayan.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, but just kind of narrowing it down into a specific thing that I know works really well for me is honestly just validating experiences. I think that the golden rules definitely help conversations be very productive, and make that person feel a lot better. But in terms of just creating a very kind space, even if you have no idea what to say whatsoever, and you haven't had a chance to go to BeThere.org again, read through the golden rules, honestly just saying like, hey, I totally, what you're going through is totally valid, and I'm sorry that you're going through that, or whatever kind of is necessary to say at that point. But just letting that person know that they're heard and that their experiences are validated is such a simple, small thing, but goes such a long way, especially as a young person who feels like often people aren't hearing them, or that other people might not know their experiences or be in their shoes. That can be the most kind thing anyone can hear, is just saying, I understand.
Thank you. Jess, close us out.
Those are two really great tips. To take a little bit different lens, I think the most important thing for me when creating kind spaces for young people is really asking young people what they need. And Maya, I think, you know, you started us off this way, and this is why I'm so proud to be a part of Jack.org and now Born This Way, because we're both really youth-centric and youth-oriented, but youth know what they need, they know what they want, you know, so asking them what it is, what makes the space kind for them, whether that's, you know, physical space or an online space or what have you, they know. And so ask them, you know, let them lead, pass them the mic. That's the most important thing for me.
Hearting your face now too. Everybody's faces are getting hearted. Absolutely. Let's end on a note to remind people that ask the young people. Well, thank you all so much for your honesty, your vulnerability, for your knowledge, and for helping to lead with kindness and bravery. Born This Way Foundation understands the power of kindness to impact well-being, and through our partnership with you and the Jack.org team, we're inviting our community to join us in learning how to be kind by being there for a peer, a loved one, or yourself. We often forget about ourselves, so let's make sure that we don't. We hope that everyone, regardless of age, race, gender, location, sexual orientation, can learn from this initiative and use BeThere.org as a guide to help creating a kinder and a braver world. Thank you to the panelists for sharing your knowledge and your passion. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and can't wait to see you again soon, hopefully in real life before too long. Thank you so much.